Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Snappy. Hunter wasn't usually the happiest when he had a migraine. He would often get a little snappy with the others. And on very few occasions had he ever yelled at one of them before. Hunter was trying to fall asleep in the chair closest to the control panel, right outside the cockpit. His migraine wasn't too bad, but it was bad enough to be annoying. It had been nagging him all day. Hunter's feet were propped up on the control panel, and his arms were folded against his chest. He had put his bandana over his eyes to block out the light from the control panel. He still felt a little ringing in his ears from the others moving or talking every once in a while, but he finally drifted into a light sleep. The ship shook violently as it was being shot at. Hunter woke up from his nap. The footsteps of Wrecker racing to the gunner's mount made Hunter cringe with pain. They were shot at a second time, and now Gonky had fallen on the floor, making the pain 10 times worse than it was before. Hunter quickly moved his hands to his ears and grunted from the ringing pain left in them. He finally removed his bandana from his eyes when the ringing was up. He made his way to the door of the cockpit. Echo and Tech were trying to revert power and steer away from the attacker. The flashing lights and beeping from the buttons were not helping his migraine at all, but he knew he had to help. "What's the status of the hyperdrive?" Hunter said, standing between the pilot and co-pilot seats. "It's down. I'm trying to reroute the power now," Echo said, pushing away at control buttons. Hunter sat in the co-pilot chair when Echo went to fix the next problem. Hunter was ready to fire on incoming attackers. Tech's flying was no help to his migraine, as his flying was very erratic and unpredictable. The constant jerking of the ship made Hunter's head pound. Omega was at the back of the ship with Wrecker in the gunner's mount, trying to help in any way she could. While there wasn't much she could do there, she decided to walk to the cockpit. She stopped when she saw Echo trying to reroute power to the hyperdrive and help him fix it. When they finally rerouted the power back to the hyperdrive, Echo yelled, "Punch it!" Hunter felt a slight and almost painful sting in his ears from Echo's yell. Tech pushed the lever for the hyperdrive and went into hyperspace. The quick transition from space to hyperspace had made Hunter feel almost nauseous. The fast takeoff had made his head hit the back of the chair he was sitting in, and he grunted in pain. Then the flash of bright light from the hyperspace made him draw his hands over his eyes as the pain worsened. He moved out of the co-pilot chair and was headed for the door of the cockpit, needing to get away from the intense light. He was about to be out of the door when Omega stopped in front of him, in the cockpit. Omega looked up at Hunter to see that he had his hand holding his head and was almost covering his eyes. She noticed he looked like he was almost in pain. "Hunter, are you okay?" Omega watched as he squinted a little. "Yeah, I'm fine," Hunter said, slowly trying to get around Omega, but to no avail. Hunter could now hear Wrecker making noise in the gunner's mount, irritating his headache even more. He could also hear the clink of tools from Echo trying to fix the ship. All of this put together, plus Omega's questions, were making his migraine worse, and his patience running thin. He just needed to be dark and quiet so his migraine would go away. "Are you sure you're fine? Because you don't look so good," Omega said with genuine concern. "Yes, Omega, I'm fine," Hunter said, rubbing his head, trying his best to keep his growing temper down. "Please, can I just pass through?" "Hunter, I can go get the med—" Omega was cut off by Hunter. "Omega, move out of the way," Hunter yelled out to her. The pain in his head grew to be too much, making him snap at Omega. Omega quickly moved to the side as Hunter rushed off to the back of the ship, scraping past Wrecker's shoulder. Omega had never been yelled at by Hunter before, and she didn't think it was possible for Hunter to get mad. But he did. Omega looked down at the ground. She felt the corners of her eyes sting with tears. She hated the feeling of being yelled at by Hunter. Wrecker was just as surprised, as he knew the last person that would ever yell at would be Omega. He looked back at Hunter to see that he had turned off the lights in the back and was lying on his bunk with a blanket over his head, turning towards the wall. Wrecker walked over to Omega and bent down. He heard small sniffles coming from Omega as she turned her head away. "I was just trying to help." Omega looked away from Wrecker, avoiding his gaze. "Hunter didn't mean to yell at you, Omega," Wrecker said softly. "Then why did he?" Omega looked up at Wrecker. He could see her tear-filled eyes. "He gets like that sometimes when he's not feeling too well." "Oh." Omega looked back down at the ground sadly. Wrecker picked her up and carried her to her room. Hunter woke up. His migraine was pretty much gone and he felt a lot better. But not until the memories of what happened came back to his mind. What was he thinking yelling at Omega, he thought to himself. She didn't do anything wrong. Hunter turned over and groaned in embarrassment into the blanket that was still over his head. Hunter told himself that the first thing he would do is to apologize to Omega right away. He sat up in his bed, moving the blanket from on top of him to the side. Hunter flung his feet over the side of his bunk. The light was still off. He looked to the right to where Omega's room was. Hunter sat on his bunk, staring at the soft glow from the sheets covering the fairy lights from Omega's room. He was contemplating when he should go, not ready to face her. Hunter finally got up with a sigh. He wasn't the best at apologies, but he knew he needed to do this. Hunter approached the gunner's mount. He knocked on the panel before entering. "Omega, can I come in?" he asked politely. "Yeah." Omega's muffled voice came from behind her makeshift door that was made of sheets. He climbed into the room. She was sitting on the ground, looking out into space, holding Wrecker's Lula. Hunter sat down next to her. Omega didn't acknowledge Hunter's presence. She just kept looking straight. Hunter looked at Omega, then looked down at the ground, hanging his head low. He let out a sigh. Omega, I just wanted to say that my actions were uncalled for. Hunter didn't get a response, so he kept going. When I get really bad headaches, I don't always take things well, but I know that's no excuse. I'm sorry. Hunter kept his head down, still feeling ashamed of his actions from before. He wouldn't be surprised if Omega didn't accept the apology, but he would hate for her to be mad at him even more. As he was about to get up, Hunter felt a small hand on top of his. It's okay, Hunter. I understand. Omega seemed to surprise Hunter more than anything. She seemed to be so wise and enlightened for her age, even though she was still very young.